very pleased to welcome Ha-Joon Chang. I'm Robert Wade. I'm a professor. Did somebody say something? I'm a professor in the what used to be called the Development Studies Institute. It's been upgraded to a department. My favorite alternative name was Overseas Development Department because the acronym was odd. But it was decided to call it the Department of International Development. Let me briefly introduce Ha-Joon and the book that he's going to be speaking to. Ha-Joon was educated in Korea at high school and undergraduate economics at Seoul National University. His father, and this I think is an interesting point, family background. I have a degree in anthropology, which is why it particularly interests me, but you want to understand where he's coming from in terms of his approach to economics. I think this family background is relevant. His father was a senior civil servant in the Korean Ministry of Finance during the Park Chung-hee regime up to 1979 when Park was assassinated, but those were the critical decades of Korea's development. He then became, the father that is, then became head of the government housing bank. He was then kicked out by the incoming military government. He then became an MP, and for a short time he was Minister of Industry. So that's the kind of household that Ha-Joon grew up in. Ha-Joon came to Cambridge in 1986 to do a master's in economics, then a PhD in economics. And he joined the faculty of economics at Cambridge in 1990, where he has remained ever since. He is the author of a great many scientific papers, and just let me hold up a recent new book in which he has a very good paper. It's called Towards New Developmentalism, and it's a set of essays about new thinking in development economics, development studies. The subtitle is Market as Means Rather Than Master, which is very much the subject that Ha-Joon writes about. I have an essay in here too, by the way. The title, just to remind you, is Towards New Developmentalism by Kahn and Christensen. However, in addition to Ha-Joon's many scientific papers, he has written several what you could call popular and articulate books about development issues, titles like Kicking Away the Ladder and Bad Samaritans. These were very good books, but the book that we're launching tonight is a real tour de force. It has the rare quality of being very entertainingly and articulately written, while covering a vast scope, a magisterial scope, including some of the hottest issues of our time, going well beyond issues of development. One exception to that I have to note, and perhaps we'll come back to this, is anything much to do with environmental constraints or climate change.
I plead guilty. Yeah.
But we will come back to that, I'm sure. So the book is launched at a time when few people are now aggressively, as they were, championing neoliberal economics, but there remains a very strong inertial momentum. I've just come back from the World Bank doing research on new thinking in development economics. At least that's what I thought I was going to do research on, because the chief economist of the bank since 2007 is Justin Lin, a Chinese national, the first ever non-G7 chief economist of the World Bank. And Justin Lin is sort of pushing or nudging thinking, or trying to nudge thinking in the World Bank in the direction of what you could call Ha-Joon Chang, in this kind of direction, and away from a kind of hard neoliberal economics. But, as I discovered, he is facing very strong pushback from many economists around the bank, including in the research complex of the bank, who makes made statements to me like, oh, for every Korea there are 100 failures, that is, of countries that have apparently tried to do Korea. So obviously we, the bank, cannot endorse anything that the Koreans did. That's the kind of what you have to call stupid thinking that continues to prevail as a kind of inertial momentum. People are very, very anxious about rethinking settled opinions. So, and the problem is then that so far there has not been much of a social democratic, what you could call a social democratic alternative developed to neoliberal economics ideas so far. But it may be that the time is right now, at this time of quite a lot of uncertainty, for minds to be sprung open, and certainly my hope is that this book may help to do it. So Ha-Joon is going to speak for something like 45 minutes, and then we will open it up for your questions and discussions. Ha-Joon.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Robert, for that kind introduction. Well, as you can see, this book has definitely the weirdest cover for an economics book in history. Now, don't ask me about the cover. I mean, depending on my mood, I blame or praise my publisher for coming up with this unique cover. Yeah, today I'm feeling quite generous, so I think this is fantastic. Some days I think this is the worst cover you can think of. The book also has probably the weirdest title for an economics book. I mean, there I use the word probably rather than definitely, because there could be some other book which has even weirder title. Now, oh, 1 second. Why 23 things? Well, some people thought it was because of this guy. Where is he? Yes. Michael Jordan, the legendary American basketball player. Well, actually, I don't watch basketball. I'm a big fan of baseball, but basketball, I didn't even know that Jordan's number was 23. Others thought I was into the so-called 23 enigma in numerology, where all important events are somehow connected to number 23. Don't ask me how. As apparently argued in the Illuminatus trilogy and the movie The Number 23. Well, actually, I've never heard of this 23 enigma before, so count that out. And some more learned people have conjectured that I'm a brilliant mathematician and must be referring to the famous 23 mathematical problems of the German mathematician David Hilbert. Oops, this guy. Well, I actually have no idea what that was, so it wasn't that. Well, 23 is essentially a random number. You know, how it happened was that the working title of the book was 20 Things They Don't Tell You About Capitalism. But one day I was having coffee with my literary agent, Ivan Mulcahy, in the cafe at Pole on top of Paddington Station. We were talking about the book, and at one point, without any prompting, we looked at each other and said, 20 things, that's a bit boring, isn't it? So I said, I could easily write another dozen things, but that would make the book too long, so let's start, the chapter number at 25, and start there. Well, 25 is a bit obvious. I don't like even numbers. 21, too close to 20. So that left 23, huh? I know. This is a bit like a sketch in Monty Python, huh? The famous parrot scene and so on. But actually, the story, in a way, sums up the spirit with which the book was written. It is a light-hearted book with a serious purpose, as my US publisher, Bloomsbury USA, described. And I mean, in a way, it's quite weird. I mean, one book review in the Prospect magazine described my book as the general theory rewritten by Borges, the Argentinian writer. I mean, the reviewer didn't think it was a compliment, but being a fan of Borges, I take it as a compliment. So, I mean, there is that quirky, playful side to it, but it talks about very serious issues in a very serious way. Huh? Okay, so now, as Monty Python used to say it, for something completely different. Well, basically, the book will tell you that a lot of things that you thought you knew about capitalism are at best partial truth and at worst downright myth. Yeah? So, for example, these are the guys from Cat in the Hat. Probably you have forgotten about it because the last time you read it, you were 7. Well, thing 1 says there is no such thing as a free market. Now, that's weird because you say, well, we may or may not like the free market, but we know what it is. Yeah? At least when we see one, we know what it is, don't we? Yeah? Well, actually, we don't. Huh? Now, take an example of this the legislation tabled in the British Parliament back in 1819. This was a law to regulate child labor. This proposed regulation was incredibly weak by modern standards. It would ban the employment of only very young children, that is, those under the age of 9. My son's just turned 10, so he's would have been eligible to work in that regime. Although I already wrote a chapter titled "My 6-year-old son should work, get a job" in my earlier book, Bad Samaritans. Older children aged between 10 and 16 were allowed to work, but with their working hours restricted to what? Well, only 12 hours. Yeah? The new rules only apply to cotton factories, which are recognized to be exceptionally hazardous to workers' health. So you'd say, well, what kind of regulation is this? This is a joke. But even that was met by a very stiff opposition by free marketeers who argued, well, essentially these children want and need to work, and these factory owners want to employ them. What is your problem? Yeah? You know, freedom of contract is foundation of free market. Yeah? Today, even the most enthusiastic supporters of free market policies, at least in the rich countries, would want to bring back child labor to liberalize labor market. Yeah? Well, at least I haven't met one who says it openly. This shows that, like beauty, freedom of a market is in the eyes of the beholder. That is, there's no scientific way to define a free market. Huh? So what is a free market to some people may be seen as market riddled with regulation. Huh? The point is that like those kung fu masters you see in movies, huh? I mean, these guys are actually flying on piano wires, but they don't show it. So you think they are really flying. Yeah? Like those guys, all markets are propped up by numerous regulations on what can be sold and bought, who can sell and buy them, and how the exchange may be conducted. Yeah? And I'm not talking about heavy things like slaves, the child labor. Yeah? Do you think that you can take a bag of shares of your company to London Stock Exchange and sell them, but outside the exchange building? No. in order to sell your shares, you have to go through very rigorous regulatory process. I mean, they have to look at your accounts over a period and making sure that you are not involved in fraud. You do your due diligence and everything. So even the stock market, which you think is very free, is bound by a lot of regulations. So in this sense, we think a market is free only because we so totally approve of the regulations that are propping up that particular market that we don't see them. And that's a very important point. Free market economies like to portray all regulations as politically motivated interferences in the free workings of a natural system. However, when there is no way to scientifically define a free market positions are as political as any other position. So breaking away from the illusion of market objectivity, thing one ends by saying, is the first step towards understanding capitalism. This is a very important starting point. Because the free market economy will tell you, look, we know where the right boundary of the market is. Anyone who wants to mess around with it is a populist or backed by unions or left-winger or economically illiterate. Actually, there's no such boundary. So they want to pretend that they are scientists and others are politically motivated, but their politics is as political as other people's politics. Okay, thing two says companies should not be run in the interest of their owners. This sounds crazy, huh? Shareholders own companies, so they have the biggest stake in the success of the company, and therefore what is good for the shareholders must be good for the company. Then why do I say something like this? Well, the problem is that in modern limited liability companies with dispersed ownership, despite being the legal owners, most shareholders are actually the least committed to the long-term future of the company because they are the freest to leave. So in the last 3 decades, with increasing financial deregulation, these free-floating shareholders have become even more powerful, that hired managers have basically decided to run the company for the sake of shareholder value maximization. You must have heard this term so often. So what they do is that they maximize short-term profit by not spending in things that improve long-term productivity. So they don't invest, they don't do R&D, they do not train workers. I'm not saying that they do zero of these things, but they do the minimum that they can get away with. And in that process, they maximize their short-term profit and give away an ever-increasing share of that profit to the shareholders through increased dividends and share buybacks. So, for example, in the United States, dividends used to be around 40% of profit until the 1970s. Now it's over 60%. And given that retained profits is the biggest source of investment finance in the companies in the developed countries, this has a big impact on the investment. And the result has been long-term decline of the companies which adopted such strategy, General Motors, General Electric, Ford, you name it, so much so that Jack Welch, the former CEO of General Electric and the champion of shareholder value maximization, recently admitted that shareholder value maximization was, and I'm quoting him, the dumbest idea in the world. Well, it's a bit too late to say that, isn't it? Well, as for thing 3, what do I mean by this? Most people in rich countries are paid more than they should be. Well, we have been told by free market economists that people are paid what they are worth, So we should not complain about pay differentials and income inequality. Because if someone's paid 95 million pounds a year, he must be worth it. Otherwise, the market wouldn't tolerate. Now, leave that end aside for the moment. This has also made us think that, well, all those poor people in poor countries, they must be poor because they are not very productive. They are not worth very much. But as I do in the book, take the case of two bus drivers. I named them Ram, an Indian guy from Rajasthan, driving bus in New Delhi, and another guy is called Sven. He is a Swedish guy driving bus in Stockholm. Sven gets paid about 50 times what Ram does. But is it because Sven is a driver who drives 50 times better? Well, I'm not sure whether it is physically possible that someone drives 50 times better than someone else, unless you are comparing Lewis Hamilton or Michael Schumacher with me. But actually, when you think about it, if anything, Ram will be the better driver. And this picture will show you why. Every minute of his driving, he has to dodge the cow, dodge the rickshaw, dodge the children, dodge the bicycle stacked 3 meters high with the crates. He has to be very good. Whereas Sven, he can, except for a few drunken drivers on Saturday night, he can basically do his job as far as he can drive straight because he drives in a city like this. So how come a guy who's actually a much better driver gets paid 1/50, 2% of another guy who is essentially doing the same job with less skill? How is this possible? Well, this is possible only because of, let me put it bluntly, that protectionism, that is immigration control. And if you actually totally freed immigration, 80, maybe even 90% of the workforce in the rich countries can be and will be displaced. And I'm not just talking about bus drivers and cleaners. There are millions of bankers, engineers, and medical doctors waiting out there in China, Nigeria, and Brazil that can replace their counterparts in the United States, Japan, and Britain. Why not? Well, after all, I replaced a British economist. Now, I'm not advocating a full liberalization of immigration. Even as an immigrant, I know that that is not possible or desirable. But if they are to be consistent, free market economies should actually advocate it. But very few free market economies even see that. I mean, T.N. Srinivasan is probably the only exception. Vince Cable once said something half like that, but I mean, other free market economies are not even aware that what they are saying about free trade and that free movement of people are contradictory. Once again, the fact that very few free market economies that actually do this proves my earlier point that markets are fundamentally political constructs. There's nothing in economics which says that British immigration per year should be 50,000 or 100,000. No, it's not determined by economics. Now, the flip side of this story is that poor countries are poor not because of the poor people, but because of the rich people of those countries. When you meet rich people from poor countries, they'll tell you, if you would listen, how their countries are dragged down by all those useless people who are lazy, ignorant, and unenterprising. But actually, what they don't realize is that their countries are poor because of themselves, not because of their poor people, because most poor people in poor countries can hold their own against the rich country counterparts. Actually, many of them are more skilled, like our RAM. Yeah? But the rich in poor countries cannot actually do that. Huh? So it is that if I put it that way, their failure to pull the rest of the country up, rather than their poor pulling the rest of the country down, that is making poor countries poor. Okay, so that now leaves the rich in the rich countries. Can they pat themselves on the back and tell us that, well, we truly deserve what we earn? Well, I don't think so. Because what these people don't often realize is that their high productivity critically depends on the fact that they were born into, or at least migrated to, societies with advanced technologies, well-organized firms, good institutions, and high-quality physical infrastructure. And most of these are things that have been collectively accumulated over time and not something those individuals have created themselves. Yeah? Warren Buffett, the famous American investor, financial investor, once put it beautifully in an interview. He said, look, I'm rich only because I happen to have been born in the United States. Yeah? Drop me in the middle of Bangladesh. Yeah? I'll be a struggling farmer. I'm not very good at farming. Yeah? So I'll be rubbish. Yeah? So all of this back and forth stuff about poor people in rich countries, poor people in poor countries, rich people in poor countries and rich people in rich countries show the fundamentally collective nature of individual productivity, without recognizing which we can build a truly fair system of compensation. Yeah? So we should be able and willing to challenge these bankers when they say, well, market paid me $85 million, so you shut up. No, you should point to him that, look, I mean, the reason why you are getting this money is because we have a certain kind of economic system, certain kind of financial system with certain kind of regulation and deregulation, and that you haven't actually created all the wealth that you think you have created. I mean, just to give you an example, I mean, that in the United States, the profit rate of the financial firms doubled or almost trebled over the last 25 years. Is it because they really became that much more productive? No, it's because of deregulation. When Hank Paulson abolished leverage regulation on financial firms, he basically gave them free money. Because now they could have debt equity ratio about 5,000%. Whereas previously it was, I think, capped at something like 1,200 or something like that. Anyway, the details are not that important at this stage. Well, I mean, I obviously cannot go on like this. Things 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6, and so on. So I give you a flavor of the kind of things I say. I mean, things that sound very outrageous, but I hope that you get to accept by the end of the chapter. So, despite the fall of communism, we are still living in planned economies. The washing machine has changed the world more than the internet has. I mean, that attracted a lot of attention. Making rich people richer doesn't make the rest of us richer. Financial markets need to become less, not more efficient. Equality of opportunity may not be fair. We are not smart enough to leave things to the market. Good economic policy does not require good economists. That may be very popular. And finally, people in poor countries are more entrepreneurial than people in rich countries. Now, I can't talk about any of these, but I chose 2 of them, given the time constraints, mainly because they give me excuse to use some nice pictures. So let's look at thing 13. Making rich people richer doesn't make the rest of us richer. For the last 3 decades, free market economies have advocated policies that basically redistribute income upward. Deregulation of business, tax cuts for the rich, cuts in welfare spending, and so on. And the justification was that, look, initially this might make other people poorer, but when you make rich people richer, we will eventually make everyone richer because the rich will now have more money to invest and create more wealth. So wealth has to be created before it can be shared out. That was the typical mantra. And this is, of course, classic free market logic going back to the days of at least David Ricardo, if not Adam Smith. Unlike neoclassical economies of today, the classical economies saw the society in classes. So Ricardo said there is the capitalist class, there is the working class, and there is the landlord class. And basically, you have to give as much wealth to the capitalist class because they are the ones who are going to invest. They are the ones who are going to develop the economy. So the logic is that investable surplus needs to be concentrated in the hands of the investor, in this case the capitalist class, and that's the way to maximize investment and therefore growth. Now the interesting thing is that this is exactly the logic behind the agricultural collectivization implemented by Joseph Stalin. Well, the logic was that given that most of the economic surplus in the Soviet Union in the 1920s was in the agricultural sector, which invested very little of it because most of these people are so close to subsistence, if they produce a bit more surplus, they just ate it up. Or there were some the rich farmers who basically used it in the conspicuous consumption. So the logic said that we need to take this surplus away from the agricultural sector through collectivization, so that the government basically controls the agriculture sector and concentrate this the extracted surplus in the hands of the investor, in this case the Gosplan, the Central Planning Authority. Now typically it wasn't actually his idea. It was an idea devised by this brilliant economist who is now almost forgotten, Yevgeny Preobrazhensky. Preobrazhensky was the leading economist of the left wing of the Soviet Communist Party. Initially, Stalin, who was on the right wing of the party, argued against this idea and drove Preobrazhensky into exile in 1927. But upon becoming the sole dictator in the following year, Stalin took up the idea and went for agricultural collectivization. Now, as you all know, Stalin's collectivization led to a persecution of the kulak, the rich peasants, and a famine in which millions perished. 3 million is the sort of consensus number, but it could be even higher. So it had tremendous cost, but it actually at least delivered on its central promise, higher investment and faster growth. Because surplus was extracted, it was concentrated in Gosplan, Gosplan invested more, and then the economy grew faster. Unfortunately, we cannot say the same about the free market version of Stalinism, that is trickle-down economics. Despite concentrating wealth at an astonishing rate at the top, about which Robert has written quite a lot, and I highly recommend his writings on that, investment and growth have actually fallen in the last 3 decades of free market capitalism. In other words, our rich have become more expensive to keep. We keep giving them more and more, and they are delivering less and less. You know, I mean, they got a lot more than before. So why are we having lower investment and lower growth? Huh? You know, we have to ask these questions. Yeah? You know, I mean, as far as they do their job, I don't mind these people having all the money. Yeah? But they are not doing their job. Yeah? That's an important point. Okay, the next thing. People in poor countries are more entrepreneurial than people in rich countries. You know, this guy once famously said that the problem with the French is that they don't have the word for entrepreneurship. Right? He should have paid a bit more attention in his French class. Now, okay, I mean, that you can excuse Dobia for not being very good at French, but actually this is a fairly common Anglo-American prejudice against the French. Yeah? I mean, France is a undynamic and laid-back country, full of striking workers and sheep-burning farmers and pompous waiters and what have you. Now, as I'll tell you later, actually this conception of France is wrong. But the perspective behind this statement is widely accepted even by people who don't like George W. Bush. You need enterprising people, you need entrepreneurial people in order to have a successful economy. In this view, the poverty of developing countries is attributed to the lack of entrepreneurship in those countries. So they go to developing countries and, people from rich countries go to developing countries and visit places like this and say, this is why they don't develop. Yeah? The 11th cup of the mint tea in the morning, smoking their hookahs away, Look, I mean, these people should go out there and make money. But actually, anyone who is from a developing country or who has lived in one of them for a period will know that these countries are actually teeming with entrepreneurs. These people. In contrast, most citizens of rich countries have not even come near to becoming an entrepreneur. They mostly work for other people. They mostly work for companies which hire tens of thousands of people doing highly specialized and narrowly specified jobs, and in the process realizing someone else's entrepreneurial vision. Whereas all these people in the markets of Indonesia and Nigeria, which are what you are seeing there, are entrepreneurs. Moreover, in fact, if you compare the numbers, you will see that the chance of someone from a developing country being an entrepreneur is anything between 2 and 13 times higher than that for someone from a rich country. On average, and actually those figures are for poor countries that underestimate the extent because it is only for the urban sector. I mean, in the agricultural sector, the proportion of self-employment is even higher, but I mean, leave that aside. In poor countries, typically 30 to 50% of people work for themselves. In the rich countries, the ratio is less than half that, quarter that, and actually in some countries it's even lower. And actually you see there that the US is one of the least entrepreneurial country in the sense that the proportion of people who are entrepreneurs are much lower than in other developed countries, not to speak of countries like Ghana, Bangladesh, and Benin. France does marginally better. So, this was, I mean, the WS comment was a classic case of the pot calling the kettle black. Yeah? The difference between France and the United States is actually not as great as he thinks. Yeah? Moreover, the entrepreneurial skills of developing entrepreneurs are tested to the limit because things go wrong all the time. Yeah? You know, the delivery doesn't arrive because of, I don't know, because the truck broke down because of a pothole in the road. Yeah? I mean, the customs wouldn't clear your imports. Yeah? You know, electricity is down again. Yeah? The petty bureaucrats that are inventing new rules to extract bribes. Yeah? You know, you really have to be quick on your feet to deal with these situations. So how come, I mean, that all these people, yeah, trying to realize the entrepreneurial vision with their skills are tested to the limit, how come they remain poor? Hmm? And my argument is that this is essentially because entrepreneurship is not an individualistic endeavor anymore, if it ever was. Yeah? We need a whole host of collective institutions to channel entrepreneurial energy into the right kind of high productivity activities. Yeah? The scientific infrastructure, the corporate institutions, the legal system, the financial system, and so on. So the developing country people have a lot of entrepreneurial energy. Yeah? A lot of people are entrepreneurs, but they do not have these supporting institutions, and that's why they are poor. And this is exactly why, as I write in the chapter in the book and elsewhere, or in one of the papers that you can download from my websites, which I'll show later, this is why the microfinance program has delivered so little, actually, in terms of economic development, despite all the expectations. Huh? And this point actually nicely links back to thing 3, where I emphasize the collective nature of individual productivity. You know, I mean, we've become so used to think that it's all down to individuals. Yes, I mean, individuals are important. I mean, after I believe in human agency, and I mean, in a way, I mean, that mainstream economic models with assumptions of full rationality actually undermines the very notion of agency, because when we are so rational, we know everything. There's really no agency. The structure is given, you are rational, you figure out the best way, and there's only one right course of action. There you go. I don't believe in that kind of world, so I truly believe in the human agency, but emphasis on human agency shouldn't be confined to individuals. A lot of things are like that, like what they are because of these collective efforts, collective institutions accumulated over time. So if you begin to think purely in terms of individuals, that you actually cannot really understand this process. Anyway, I talked too much, probably. I don't know whether you can see it, but while I wind up, I'll let you have a look at the whole list of 23 things. You know, in explaining these things in the book, I have tried my best to dispel the widespread perception that economics is too complicated for non-economists. You know, I say that 95% of economics is common sense made deliberately complicated, while even the remaining 5% can be explained in essence, in plain terms, if not in all technical details. Huh? And what I wanted to do with the book is to equip my readers with some fundamental economic reasoning and some basic but often misunderstood facts about capitalism, so that they can better exercise what I call in the book active economic citizenship and demand right courses of action from our policymakers and business leaders be it in relation to financial reform, inflation, welfare state, or development policy. You know, this is not easy. I mean, I often joke that the most difficult job in the world is being a citizen of a democratic country, because you have to know everything. You have to have an opinion on everything. You know, in other jobs, your kind of the task is relatively limited and specialized. But if you want to be an active citizen, you have to have an opinion on, well, I mean, everything from global warming to pension reform to child benefit to kind of CCTVs. So a lot of people actually give up. Look, I mean, I don't even understand my own finance. I mean, how can I comment on the global financial reform? But we have to make an effort, because our refusal to engage with these things, or reluctance at least, is what allows some people to get away with murder. And when you think about it, you don't need sophisticated economics to make judgments on these things. I mean, I don't have a PhD in biology or epidemiology, but even I know that there should be some hygiene standard in food factories and restaurants. You don't need a PhD in finance to know that leverage cannot go up to 5,000%. Anyway, so it's my sincere hope that this book encourages people who normally not read economics and think economics is someone else's thing to get interested and develop the understanding. And if you want more information, you can go to these places and find out a bit more. But I'll wind up so that we can have time for discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. There's lots of the same kind of wry humor in the book, together with much more fleshed out and sustained argument than Ha-Joon was able to deliver now. Just before we opened it up, let me illustrate just how powerful have been the ideas that, and still are, the ideas that Ha-Joon is challenging. First of all, Friedrich von Hayek published a book in 1944 called Road to Serfdom, in which he argued that the beverage welfare state that was then being put in motion represented the beginning of a slippery slope, such that the curtailment of economic freedom, which the welfare state represented, would cause a curtailment of political freedom. There would then be a vicious spiral downwards, such that as economic freedom was curtailed and political freedom was therefore curtailed, we would end up in the modern version of serfdom. This was Hayek's argument in 1944. The sales of that book have been surging in the United States since Obama became a presidential candidate, and since he became president, to the point where earlier this year it was number 240 on the Amazon bestsellers list. The reason is because Glenn Beck, Rush Limbaum, the Tea Party, and other such entities have been promoting this book, published in 1944, The Road to Serfdom, as a guide to what the Obama socialist administration is trying to do with health care, with the bailout of the banks, and so on. This is the roadmap, according to these people, and they have been so persuasive as to make sales of the book 240 on the Amazon bestsellers list. I find that really quite scary. By the way, Hayek taught at LSE, of course, and was one of the people Lionel Robbins fostered to make LSE the bastion of anti-Keynesian economics. Second point, my friend Rafi Kaplinsky was having dinner with the permanent secretary of the Department of International Development some years ago, quite some years ago, and Rafi mentioned to the permanent secretary that if he went across, he was then at the Institute of Development Studies, University of Sussex, a colleague of mine, if he went across the road and joined a firm that he'd been consulting for, he could double his salary just like that. And the permanent secretary of DFID looked at him and said, "Good heavens, well, you should do it. The salary is the best indicator of your social value," he said. That is another illustration of just how powerful these ideas of the virtues of free markets have become. And this is the context in which we are still living, despite the kind of challenge to this way of seeing that the global economic crisis has thrown up. So with that, let me remind you that there's a glaring hole in the book. He doesn't talk anything about environment or climate change, and maybe somebody would like to press him on that point. So let's take 3 questions at a time, and I'll begin right up at the back. So are you all right with 3 questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right up at the back.
Hi there, Stephen Whitehead from the New Economics Foundation.
From the New Economics Foundation.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's the arguments that you've made open up a really interesting intellectual space for governments to do more to try and control markets. But you haven't really talked at this stage about what they should do. And I wondered if you had any, and it's always a difficult question, any policies, prescriptions that the UK government could undertake now to try and control financial markets to improve well-being.
Okay. There was somebody else in the gallery. Yes.
Ken Rump from an investment bank. You don't really care which one. The question was...
We know it's not Lehman Brothers.
The question was really related to your one about the Korea versus the many failures. What are the lessons from Korea's development that can be made, if any? Because it seems to me that the idea of the importance of institutions and governance isn't completely novel in development thinking.
Okay, and last one in the gallery, and then we'll come down. Yes.
Hello. Yeah. Hi. My name is Usman. I'm from SOAS. I'm a student of politics, and of all the points that I saw, I was really hoping you'd bring this up. Number 4. The washing machine has changed the world more than the internet.
Right, yeah.
I'm actually fascinated to know exactly how do you come to that conclusion.
Okay, over to you.
Right. Yeah, I do make quite a few concrete proposals throughout the book, and also summarize them in the concluding chapter, so that you can read those and get the details. But yeah, basically in the British case, I see that the task is to restore balances. Balances between the state and market, balances between the finance and industry, balances between finance and the real economy, and balances between the finance and services. Let me give you one illustration. The ratio between the total value of financial assets in the world economy and world output. Of course, these two are kind of different figures, so I'm not saying that they can be directly compared, but used to be like 1.2 in the early 1970s. These days it's 4.4, which means that to produce the same unit of output, we need nearly 4 times more financial assets than before. Why? I have nothing against finance, the mushrooming, if it actually makes the economy bigger. But we now have, I mean, the same, I don't know, the poor guy in New Orleans that trying to make his ends meet while repaying mortgage, compared to 40 years ago, there are 4 times more claims on his activities. Why? I mean, these things need to be looked at. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, to paraphrase Winston Churchill, I think capitalism is the worst economic system except for all the others. So, I mean, I'm not anti-capitalist as some people are. I mean, I think this is the best system that we have. But my problem is that the particular variety of capitalism that we have practiced, this finance-driven free market capitalism, hasn't served the humanity very well. Now, Korea versus failures. Yeah, actually, this is a point that I have been making probably for good 10 years since I published my book, Kicking Out the Ladder, in 2002 and 1 or 2 things before that. People like to portray Korea as an exception that proves the rule. Actually, it is not an exception. Because the strategy that Korea used to develop its economy, the selective industrial policy, government mobilizing the surpluses and controlling capital flows and so on. I mean, these are policies that virtually all of today's rich countries have used in order to develop their economy. This strategy actually was invented in Britain by Robert Walpole, the first prime minister. And it was copied and theorized by the Americans. The famous infant industry argument was invented by none other than Alexander Hamilton, the first ever Treasury Secretary of the United States. And then the Germans learned it from the Americans and copied it, and the Japanese copied it from the Germans, and the Koreans copied it from the Japanese, and so on. So yes, I mean that when people say, for every Korea there are 100 failures, I ask that these people then, how do you explain all these other 30 countries that have become rich essentially using the same policies? I mean, same not in exact form, but in terms of the spirit, that is, you need to nurture and protect your young industries when you are a backward economy. The washing machine, actually, this has been quite extensively discussed in my interview with the Observer newspaper with my picture with the washing machine. So you can read that. But yeah, very briefly, the point is that we tend to get fascinated by the most recent changes. Yeah, and the internet revolution is happening now. It has changed a lot of things, but when you think through it, actually it has changed mainly our leisure life. I mean, in terms of work life, actually there's very little evidence that the internet has increased productivity. And actually it has made, at least in offices, shirking very easy. I do that. I watch my favorite the sports broadcast in my office. I read newspapers. In contrast, the washing machine, I mean, it isn't just washing machine, but the washing machine and associated household technologies like pipe water and pipe gas, I mean, electric Hoover and so on, they have basically enabled women to go out and earn independent income. And this has changed a whole host of things. The power relationship within the household, the number of children we have, the timing of the children that we have, and I mean the abolishment of profession like domestic servants. I mean say you go to Egypt, something like 10% of population is hired as domestic servant, You go to Sweden, the ratio is 0.005%. Yeah? So put together, these are the really monumental changes. I'm not saying that internet that in the end may, I mean, even in the future that may not change things as much as the washing machine has, but at least so far, the evidence is pretty limited. And even in terms of sheer speed, I mean, internet has the other revolutionary features like the search capability and ability to send pictures and so on. But in terms of pure speed, it isn't actually that revolutionary. The real revolution was when they laid the cable under the Atlantic to send telegraph. Before that, it used to take like if you are really lucky, 2.5 weeks to send a message across the Atlantic. With the telegraph, the time was reduced to what, 20 minutes, 30 minutes? Yeah? This is a reduction in the order of 2,000-3,000 times. The internet has reduced the speed from what, the 30 seconds that takes on fax machine to say 3 seconds. It's actually not that revolutionary. Internet gets a lot of press because people who write about these things have benefited a lot from it. Yeah, I did. I mean, I wrote a whole book with my friend Eileen Grable, who teaches in Colorado, Denver, Colorado, with just one face-to-face meeting. Everything else was done on the internet. So for someone like me, my work life has been transformed. But does it mean that actually it has had big social impact? Maybe. Does it mean that it has had a huge economic impact? I don't think so. So, well, I mean, if you are intrigued, please read the book.
Just a qualification on your argument that you're critical of a particular type of capitalism, finance-driven capitalism, but a distinction has to be made between at least two types of finance capitalism. In the Belle Epoque, around the turn of the 20th century, financiers, the big financiers, were very powerful, and they were sitting on the boards of the big oligopolies that were driving the new mass production industries. The difference today, I mean, since the 1980s, is that finance has become, yes, very powerful, but also quite detached from production in a way that the Belle Epoque financiers were not, to the point where finance is generating huge profits by financing finance. That's the paradox.
That's right.
Finance is financing finance, far removed from production. And that is part of the reason why it has become so parasitic.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, without modern financial institutions like the banking and limited liability companies, we would still be living in the Adam Smith's pin factory world. So these financial institutions have been very important. And actually, paradoxically, one of the people who first saw it, as I discussed in Thing 2, was Karl Marx. In his time, a lot of free market economists were against limited liability companies because they thought it creates, in modern terms, moral hazard, which it does. But Marx said, well, I mean, never mind that, it allows a huge mobilization of huge amount of capital, which allows the implementation of the new technologies, and this is capitalist production in its highest forms. I mean, of course, he supported it because he thought this will eventually lead to socialism, because this will lead to separation between ownership and management, and then when that happens, you can just kick out the owners, because they are not really doing anything, and then the managers can be the party officials or whatever. So he had the hidden agenda, but he was able to see how these institutions are doing very powerful, positive things. Unfortunately, as Robert put it very well, I mean, now is finance for its own sake.
Okay, let's take 3 more questions. I'll take them from down here. Yes.
Good evening. My name is Tanya Dimitrova from Queen Mary University. My question won't come as a surprise, but you do seem to avoid the topic of environmental constraints to economic growth and sustainable development. And unless you have a really good reason to avoid it, could you please talk a little bit more about it?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Good evening. I'm from LSE.
And
I want to
Moldova, I think.
Yes. I want to go back to the washing machine question and kind of say that I come from a country that has managed to overturn the government through Twitter overnight with, more than 20,000 people coming up.
This is Moldova?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, because in the book you just talk about internet as email connection or connectivity, but you don't really touch upon information and getting people to motivated to or mobilized. And my second thing is, thing 2 and 3 and 13 are very based on kind of a relative approach, global versus local. And I was wondering, you say in the book what actions should be taken, but you don't mention by who, and I was wondering if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
No, I'm not sure whether I understand the question. I mean, global versus local.
So for example,
Use the mic.
For example, the driver, right? That's in terms of mobility and should be, it's an approach to economics rather than local economics, global economics. So, if there is mobility to be increased or liberalized, that is kind of like a global issue. And who should, deal with that?
Right, okay.
Okay, and at the back? Yes.
Hi there. You said early on in your talk
Sorry, can
that
you just identify yourself?
my name's Liam. That's as much. You said in your speech about your book that you wish the rich would do their jobs. In that case, you wouldn't have so much of a problem with them, as you no doubt are aware that most financing of entrepreneurial and business activity takes place through banks and central banks. And I was wondering what you thought the role of central banks and banks should be in a democratic capitalist society, and whether you think that the actual nature and role of money is something that should be maybe number 24 on your list.
Meaning what? The role of money? What specifically do you have in mind?
Well, focusing on the nature of it, the idea, I think what came through from your talk was that this idea of money is quite a tangible thing, and that the rich redistribute it amongst people that are in need of it for entrepreneurial activity. As we know, the modern financial system doesn't work like that, and banks are redistributing or handing out financial assets to people that haven't been deposited with them. And I'm wondering whether the very nature of money and financial instruments is something that is misunderstood by people as when they perceive capitalism, and whether that's the thing that should be on the end of the list, that money itself is misunderstood.
Right. On the question of environment, well, I don't have a chapter because I don't think I have anything interesting or new to say. And it's not because I don't think it's unimportant. I mean, there are lots of important things that I could have said, but didn't because I don't know much about it. So it's not a hugely political decision. Washing machine, yes. I mean, the internet has done those things, but I don't know. I mean, you have to put it into perspective. I mean, I think there were more revolutions before the internet than there are now, because people are, probably distracted by frivolous things on the internet. No, I mean yeah, not that. I mean, saying that things like what you have said is irrelevant, but once again, please read my book. I give just a few examples, but we tend to think things that are happening now, things that have happened very recently are necessarily more important, but that's not necessarily the case. I think your point about the global and local, after I understood it, is very good, very important. In whose benefits, from whose points of view are we devising these policies? Once again, take the case of immigration. If you have a job in a rich country, which other people cannot easily take away, you will actually benefit from having the freest possible immigration, because your restaurant bills will go down, and you are probably able to hire a chauffeur now and all that. But when this immigration happens, the local people who used to do those jobs lose their jobs. So it's very bad for them. I have a chapter discussing whether the U.S. truly has the highest living standard in the world. And there, one point I make is that the reason why purchasing power of the Americans are so much greater than the purchasing power of the other countries is mainly because it has cheap services for a country of that level of income. This is great if you're a consumer, but if you're a waitress or taxi driver, it sucks. For example, if you take the same, say, 5-mile taxi ride in Boston, you pay something like $15. The same taxi ride in Geneva will cost you $35. So the money actually goes mostly to the taxi driver. So if you are the passenger, yes, it's great that you have all these unemployed medical doctors from Nigeria driving taxis in New York and driving down the taxi fare. But if you are that guy driving the taxi, it's not great. I think these are, really difficult questions. In whose interest are we devising these policies? Central bank, yes. I believe that central banks should be politically controlled. This idea of central bank independence I find very problematic, because there's this presumption that central bankers are politically neutral technocrats. No, they are not. They are by nature kind of in favor of the financial industry. So when you leave these people independent, they'll do policies that are inherently favorable to finance at the cost of jobs and growth. So you have to control these people. The one brilliant thing that the neoliberals have pulled off is to convince the world that every important decision should be taken out of democracy. So give it to independent central bank. The World Bank has been advocating independent revenue agency, independent industry regulators. Why do you then have democracy? So the central bank independence should be put in that context. If you give independence to these unelected technocrats, you are handing them the power that cannot be controlled by your democratic institutions, and you have reduced the importance of your democracy by so much. On the question of nature of money, I have nothing intelligent to say. So let's leave it there. But when I use the expression money, I don't necessarily mean money in the economic sense. That you could say that I'm talking about surplus and income and so on. So when I say money, I don't necessarily mean money in the strict sense.
On the subject of central banks and banking, let me just mention two excellent films that are just about to come out. The first one is called The Flaw, as in F-L-A-W rather than F-L-O-O-R, The Flaw, which takes its title from Alan Greenspan's testimony to Congress, in which he admitted he had discovered a flaw in his ideology. His ideology being that shareholders would always make sure that their company did not take unnecessary risks to its survival, and then he discovered that they would. And this film is by David Sinkton, and it's about how this great crisis came upon us, with a particular emphasis on the role of income distribution and wealth distribution in generating financial fragility. The second film is called Inside Job, by Charles Ferguson, and it contains some truly astonishing interviews with bankers. I'll leave it there, but look out for these two films. We have time for, I think, just another quick round. Yes. One. Yes.
There's some upstairs.
Okay. This is one.
Yes, thank you. My name is Nita, and I'm from Mauritius. I'm a member of Parliament of the Labour Party there. My one question...
You're a member of Parliament?
Yes, of Mauritius.
Mm.
And a member of the Labour Party. My question would be, again, with the environment, but with a specific question of, given that 3/4 of the world population live in sun-drenched areas, why do you think photovoltaic solar technology is still so prohibitive in order to respond to renewable energy? And the question that I can't help myself asking is about thing 20. Why do you think equality of opportunities is not fair?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there was a question over here. Nalima? No.
Nalima Govardjani, Department of International
Speak
Development.
up.
Sorry, Department of International Development and Government Department. If Ed Miliband were to take you out for lunch, which I understand he
That famous lunch, yeah.
He might be doing.
Speak up.
Sorry, if Ed Miliband were to take you out for lunch, as I understand he might be doing, if he hasn't done so already, what would you tell him about the austerity measures that the coalition government is introducing? Is it striking the balance that you think the UK needs, or is it not?
Okay, I think this will be the last one. Yes, in the gallery.
Before your book came out, the big selling economics books in this country in recent times have all been, seems to me, to do with behavioural economics. What is your view of that sort of approach to economics?
Which one, sorry?
Behavioral economics.
Oh, behaviour, yeah.
Your view of behavioral economics. Okay. Just a few minutes.
Okay. Yes, I mean, the problem with the lack of photovoltaic technology is that people who have the capabilities to develop those technologies don't want them. Basically, the problem is that the rich countries have the capabilities to develop these technologies, but it's not in their interest to do it. I mean, they would rather kind of invade Iraq and get more oil. I mean, a lot easier, you know. So there is that fundamental mismatch between needs and capabilities. And as for this proposition, the equality of opportunity may not be fair. I mean, I wasn't saying that it that should be rejected. I mean, what I was trying to say in that chapter is that it is only the starting point. You know, would you call a race fair simply because no one is allowed to have a head start if half the contestants have only one leg? You know, I mean, this is a serious point. I mean, that rich countries say, oh, developing countries should play by the same rule. I mean, people with kind of money and good education say that these poor kids should compete on equal terms. No, I mean, that's not enough. So that I was trying to argue that you need some degree of equality of outcome in order to ensure that equality of opportunity has true meaning. Right. Nilima's, when it talked about lunch at Miliband, she was referring to this editorial article in The Guardian, which recommended that Ed Miliband takes me out to lunch. So if it happens, it will be the first example of the arranged lunch, as in arranged marriage. Well, without assuming anything about the lunch, yes, I think this austerity plan of the conservative government is wrong in so many ways. First of all, the origins. I was listening to Ian Duncan Smith on radio yesterday. He was talking as if that this deficit was created by the Labour Party throwing money center, left, and right. No, this was mainly created by the banking crisis. So they, first of all, got the diagnosis wrong. And secondly, they keep talking about devising a fairer system, but that people who have caused this accident that should bear the blunt of the bulk of the burden, whereas in coming up with this bank levy, that they surprised the bankers by coming up with a figure that was considered too low even by the bankers. And in macroeconomic terms, if you cut your deficit too far too quickly, you are going to push your economy into recession again. This is why when Spain a few months ago announced this austerity plan, Moody's immediately downgraded its credit rating. Because they knew that if you cut the deficit in that kind of way, you are going to push the economy back into recession. But one thing I don't understand in this debate is, why are people so obsessed with dates? Dates do not have any meaning in economics. Why do you need to cut it in half by 2014 or cut it by 70% by 2015? If you have economic reasoning, you should say things like, we will cut this much, but may stop if the economy takes a downturn, if the manufacturing production index falls below this. You have to use indicators that have economic meaning. 2013, 2014 doesn't have any meaning. This is a death by number. So and then on top of that, the coalition has this agenda to roll back the welfare state, which I do not agree with, because I argue in thing 21 that the welfare state is the bankruptcy law of the workers, and we need that actually to encourage the workers to take the initiative and risk. So yes, where do I stop? Okay, I'll stop there. Behavioral economics, yes, I actually talk about Herbert Simon, the father of behavioral economics, a lot in my book. So I'm favorably inclined to that school, but there are many different types of behavioral economics, and if you are talking about those things that we saw in more popular kind of economics books recently, I'm not entirely sure whether I like it, but there's a great book written by University of Michigan psychology professor called Free Market Madness, and he actually has a lot of very interesting behavioral research backing up his argument, analyzing how market behaviors can be very irrational and so on.
What's his name?
It's in the book, in my book. I forgot. Well, another reason to buy the book.
And what is the title then?
Free Market Madness.
Free Market Madness. Okay.
Okay, so I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay.